Hello, everyone. I am so happy to be speaking today with Rachel Whitfield. Rachel is a mom, a runner, a business owner. She had COVID, she had long COVID, and she recovered from long COVID. Yay. And she is an NHS leadership trainer. And she is using her skills to speak and blog about her experience. And she has become a beacon of hope for thousands. I know. And for me. And I'm so grateful to say that she's become a friend, and we've corresponded over the last few months, and I admire her and turn to her for advice. And I am excited to be visiting with her today, and so she can share her insights with all of you. Welcome, Rachel.
Hello, hi Amy. It's really good to meet you finally after email correspondence, and I think because you're 7 hours behind as well, so it's always like I'll write an email and then I wake up in the morning and there's an email from you and vice versa. So really nice to actually put a face to a name.
Yeah, I'm loving it. Well, tell us, if you would please start out by just telling us about your experience with having COVID and that journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I've blogged a lot about it, so I'll kind of keep it fairly brief. But I got COVID in early December 2020, and fairly mild, a week maybe of quite sort of brain foggy and fatigue, but it wasn't as awful an experience as I think I had been expecting. And I quite enjoyed it once I kind of got over the the fact that I'd meant that the whole class, my daughter's class, had to isolate, and I'd had to cancel work because I couldn't really think straight. We actually had quite a nice time in the run up to Christmas, watching films and eating, and I recovered, and it was Christmas, so I went back to normal really. And then this is a very similar story to a lot of people, I now realise. In very early January, having got back to running and exercise and work and had a Christmas of maybe indulging a bit, 4th or 5th of January, I realised that I was absolutely exhausted, and I was sleeping kind of 13 hours and lots of fatigue and could barely think or function. And I struggled through a few days of work. And then kind of crashed really. My system just seemed to shut down, and like lots of other people, then after a few days of stopping and resting, I got back and I was fine and I felt really great, and so I got back to normal, and then 2 weeks after that I crashed again. And so the cycle continued, and I think it's probably the same as yours and lots of other people's journeys, until about mid-February, towards the end of February maybe, I just crashed, and instead of it being boom bust, it was just bust.
Oh no.
So, and I think I just took the decision. Well, I kept thinking, should I work, should I not, maybe I'll get better, maybe I won't. And I think that was actually really exhausting, and so towards the end of February I took the decision just to completely stop everything. I didn't really know what was causing it, but I thought if I just stopped and did nothing, then perhaps that would help. So yeah, and in fact that probably was the start of my journey in terms of recovery, was to take the decision to stop. Yeah, and then I think I decided to read my way through it. So I've always been someone that likes learning. And so and because I'm a trainer, and I work a bit within the NHS, or quite a lot within the NHS, I decided that I was going to learn about what was happening in order to be able to help myself, and somewhere in the back of my mind to help other people. So I slowly recovered through a mixture of rest and not so much rest, de-stress. I think now de-stressing, there's a difference. And also then starting to understand the illness and how it can keep you stuck, and really kind of retraining my brain and understanding how your brain can, the mind-body connection, and how the two play out and work together. And I recovered. It's hard to set a date because I originally said 11th of May, and then I actually had a wobble And then I decided I'd recovered at the end of May. But actually, it's not quite that simple because, as you know, and as I know, there's some well-trodden pathways, I think, between our brain and our body. And so there's been a few wobbles, but at the moment I feel better than ever. And each wobble has been this kind of learning that has helped in terms of the journey.
Oh, okay. Now, not to talk too much about the illness, because I want to talk about how you got through that and where you are now. But if you had to say what was one of the hardest parts of being sick and a bizarre symptom that you were dealing with, maybe you could share that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that at the time freaked me out. One was the toes. I looked down and my toes were purple and swollen, and that just felt really scary for some reason. And then I Googled toes and I saw the symptom COVID toes. And because it was a new novel illness, I think that really freaked me. So maybe that was one of the scariest. Plus my ribs hurt, my throat felt like it was burning, my back felt like it was burning. At one point I looked grey. I remember looking in the mirror and hadn't left the house for weeks and I just looked grey. In terms of the hardest symptom, the insomnia.
Oh,
I
yes.
convinced myself that if I didn't sleep, I wouldn't recover.
Right.
And of course, the harder I tried and the more products I bought and the more things I tried to take, sleep doesn't work like that. I entered this cycle and that went on for months. So I think that was the hardest, but for some reason, the toes just freaked me out.
Well, I'm sure I did not have COVID toes and I probably, I don't know. Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I had enough other bizarre symptoms that would have really put me over the top.
We all have a different signature. Everyone always wants to know what were your symptoms, because if you have the same symptoms, they feel like they're on the same journey. What I've learned is we've all had this different signature. It's all nervous related, but for some reason it shows up differently in different people.
Yeah,
So,
you're right. Now I have to ask. So I believe that whether somebody just got COVID or if they're dealing with long COVID, the element of the worry, the fear, the anxiety, if we can learn how to work with that, that can affect our recovery.
Yeah.
If we can understand what is happening physically and psychologically with that worry, that we can somehow possibly counteract some of that ahead of time or while we are sick and access maybe a calm that's within or beneath that anxiety and work through that. What do you think of that? I know you have a lot to say about that. You've blogged a lot about that and you have some great tools that you've used. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. What are my thoughts on that? So many. It's just trying to collect my thoughts in terms of what do I think? I mean, for me, anxiety featured right from the beginning. The moment that I realized I had COVID, I had this awful, awful feeling that I've had once before. And I had it once before where I thought I was going to die in a scuba diving accident. That absolute fear that I don't know that just affects your entire body, but you can't kind of get away from it because it's happening inside your body. And then all the way through, every time I had a crash, if you like, that anxiety would be often the first thing that would show up. For me, I know there's lots of tools in terms of anxiety and things you can do, for example, meditation and breathing exercises, and all of those helped. But I think for me, the biggest thing was learning more about the illness, because with insight, anxiety and fear, they're all, I've been told fear should stand for false expectation about reality. Our brains make things up, right?
I have never heard that. I like that.
It's great, isn't it? But if we don't know about something, your brain kind of fills in the gaps, but it tends to fill it in negatively. And if you're talking to other people who also are experiencing the same thing, then collectively you start to do that. So for me, the biggest kind of thing that made the biggest difference in terms of calming me down was deciding to learn my way out of it by reading, and when I was too exhausted to read, by listening to things, and to start to get an idea in terms of what was going on for me. Because as soon as I filled in the gaps, some of that fear then went away. And then when I was exposed to, well, is it a microclot, or is it some biomedical thing, or is it my mitochondria, I had enough kind of belief and insight that I was able to go, I'm convinced, no, I'm convinced it's my nervous system. But it was through learning that I think that made the biggest difference.
Oh boy.
I don't know if I've answered your question actually or
Yes,
not.
no, I mean, this is such a big topic, and there's just so many, it's so multifaceted. And I remember experiencing the same thing. I didn't want to do too much research because I was scared, and what I would come across was often just so awful and negative and dire. But the more I learned too, and like, oh wait, this is my nervous system, and I can calm this down, and I'm not broken, that really helped me too.
It's huge, isn't it? Because otherwise the whole, you've got depression, which is kind of worrying about the past, isn't it? And anxiety, worrying about the future. And if you're worried then that it's something really biomedical and there's something permanently damaged with you, that can feed into this awful cycle. Whereas if you go, no, it's not permanent, this is just my nervous system,
Yes.
then everything starts to fade away and get a bit easier.
Yeah.
So I definitely had some real insights in terms of certain things I listened to that started to abate the fear.
Okay, good. Yeah, I found that mentally I could sort of try to get on top of things, but it was hard when my body was sending these messages that I didn't like. And before a thought or an emotion would even happen, my body was freaking out, and the fight or flight was already active. And so then I could use some agency to say, okay, here, let's interrupt this cycle. If there were a go-to that you had when you found yourself in one of those cycles, what would it have been that, Rachel? I mean, a couple of them that you said, oh, this is how I broke this cycle, or this was on one day or another that worked for you.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I just had some insights and some real light bulb moments. So I think I got lucky. Someone told me about the Gupta program, and I don't think it's perfect, but I listened to that before I listened to anything else. And he talked about the nervous system and being stuck in fight or flight. So I think that kind of set my path. And because I had already done some NLP and I understood how beliefs work and fear, and I understood the mind-body connection, I think I was then kind of on that path. So then everything else I looked for was part of that. But I remember very clearly sitting on the grass outside my house in my garden, and I had just come out of the fourth or fifth relapse. And then I'd had a few days where I was okay. And then I was feeling like I was going back into another relapse. And at that point, I thought that relapses just happened to you. I thought there was nothing you could do. They just kind of came for you. And I'd started to feel that familiar anxiety. And I thought, oh no, there's nothing I can do. It's coming. And then I listened to an episode of Nicole Sachs. And it was called The Relapse is Part of the Healing Process. And in it, she explains that actually the relapses don't just happen. You might feel just a bit rubbish, but it's the fear of the relapse that actually causes the relapse. And so I remember just listening to it in the garden and getting to the end of it and going, oh, I've got some agency in this. I've got some control in this. And I rang my mum, who was like my most amazing mentor ever, and helped me throughout this whole journey. And I went, Mum, I've got this light bulb moment. This is a key moment in my recovery. It's not just something that happens to me. It might be that I wake up feeling a bit rubbish one day and I can't control that. But what I do with that rubbish is completely in my control. And, and then I didn't relapse. I mean,
Really?
no, and then I listened to another of her podcasts that talked about, she called it pre-grieving. And she said what happens is that you're so worried about an event coming up and worried about whether you might relapse for that event, that you actually end up driving the relapse because you're worried. And I realized that I'd been doing that. Every time I cancelled work, I felt okay. When I then had some work coming up, about 4 days before, I would start entering into a relapse. And it was because I was so worried about what if I'm not all right, what if I'm not all right, over and over, that was actually driving it. So that was my biggest light bulb moment. There were others, but
Oh, that's such a good one. That's such a good one. And I remember reading in your blog just the other day, anxiety could be the final hurdle.
yeah,
And because I've had a little bit of, I feel great for the most part, but I've had a little bit of anxiety creeping up, and you talking about that now and me having read that, it's like, okay, hey, this could
yeah,
is a learning experience. This is something I can learn from and grow from. And I'm just, gosh, I'm glad that you had that moment that you can share with us about it.
yeah. A lot of people do talk about anxiety being the last symptom. It's almost like your brain or your nervous system is going, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? And a lot of people talk about actually anxiety almost goes up before it disappears. I don't know
Really?
what that's about. Alan Gordon talked about it in his book The Way Out, how it's almost like it's trying to have the last say.
Right. It's
So
like,
it
oh no,
kind of
you
goes on
don't.
the accelerator. Yeah, exactly. The accelerator. Are you really sure? Are you really sure it's safe to do this?
Right.
I'm okay now. If I get anxiety, it's almost like, oh, okay, phew, I can handle this.
Good.
I know what it is now. Because I think it's fear of the anxiety creates the anxiety, because it's
Well,
a
yes.
horrible feeling, right? Isn't it?
Yes. And so now you are running again,
I'm
and
running
you're
again.
back to
Yeah.
work, and you're being a wonderful mom, and feeling good about life again. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got normal anxiety now, so I've signed up for a marathon in May.
oh, fun. Oh, that's
Which is
awesome.
actually one that got cancelled from 2 years ago. But so I've got normal anxiety in terms of, will I go round and will I be able to do the training and all the rest of it?
Yeah.
But I think it's fairly normal anxiety. The other person that absolutely just really helped me in terms of anxiety actually was a lady called Nicola Bird. I talk
Mhm.
about like I know these people personally, I don't, but you sort of feel like they're part of the family and part of your journey. And she explains that when she had anxiety, nothing to do with COVID, but she just had anxiety for years. But she explained that your thoughts just come. You can't really control your thoughts because by the time you're aware of your thoughts, they've already appeared. But if you just kind of notice them and observe them and let them just kind of run as if they're on a kind of ticker tape and don't assign meaning to them, then new thoughts will come along. And I don't know why, but that just made me go, oh, okay.
Doesn't that
I
help?
don't have to ignore them. I don't have to fight them. I don't have to pretend they're not there. I can just notice them and know that if I don't like those thoughts, there'll be some more ones.
Right. And I think in her book that you recommended to me, she refers to some of those that thought, that personality being like Bob was the guy's name, like some drunken guy. And so now I'll be, doing something and some thought will come in. I'll be like, oh, Bob, go sit down. And now we
Exactly.
don't have time for your babbling
Bob,
right now.
yeah, exactly.
Better
Bob's
things.
the homeless guy on the streets, isn't
Yeah.
he? And you can notice him. He's your thoughts, but you don't have to invite him in for a cup of tea at 3 in the morning. You
Right.
can just kind of notice him, leave him be, and leave him there, and
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just resonated, but it's not a tool, right? It's just an insight. It's a new way of thinking. But somehow, if I get new ways of thinking, for me, that changes everything.
Well, I think
um,
it is just interrupting that pattern. We get into this habit. I mean, we're just a bundle of habits, and we think this way, and then our body is going through this, and it's learned to react to stress this way, and been kind of have this constant stress. So it takes some digging, and finding unique little ways to break that pattern and change the subject, and yeah, and get through this. But we
yeah.
can get through it, and that's the most important thing that I think people need to know, because I know for me and for you too, there's a time when you feel like
Yeah.
this is it. Is this how I'm always going to be?
Why does long COVID do that to you? I mean, I've never considered ending my life, for instance, but I thought
No,
about it. I don't think I thought about it enough to actually do it, but I certainly had those really dark thoughts. I don't know what it is about this illness that does that. And I've spoken to a lot of people that when you're in it, you convince yourself you're never going to get better. And then
yeah,
you talk to other people that are convinced that they're never going to get better.
yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It is,
Um,
and it's fascinating to think what the virus has done
yeah,
to short term. I don't believe, it's permanent. I don't think we are broken. I think that it takes a lot to get through it, and a lot of we have to find some interesting coping mechanisms to get through it, and calming the body and calming the nervous system. Gosh, I loved what you said earlier about how rest is different from de-stress.
yeah,
Because I think people think, oh, I'll just rest. And it's like,
yeah,
you can rest and still be going, ah. And
yeah.
so,
And that's it. I see people, and I kind of started to do it, but then I stopped. So I see people where they've just been in bed for 12 months, but that's not rest. Or
no,
that is rest, but it's not the rest that we're talking about. The rest we're talking about is actually more mental rest,
right.
emotional rest, calming your minds down.
Yeah.
And so there's some words that are interesting, like pacing. I
Mhm.
don't know, somehow the kind of message has got out there that you need to count the number of steps and divide tasks into, things that will use your energy. And actually all that does is create worry and create hypervigilance and
Yeah.
keep you stuck.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it's about just chilling out and learning to
Right.
kind of just give yourself some space to calm down the minds.
Can you speak more to that energy? Because I went through that with pacing.
Yeah,
At first it was like, okay, this was good, because I wrote down how I was using my energy, which for
yeah,
me, I would see, oh, when I'd have conversations or meetings that got me riled up. And oh, this time when I go for long walks, I would feel my energy relaxing. And maybe energy wasn't the right word. Maybe it's
yeah,
calming and stressing, because you've mentioned
yeah.
before that it's not really energy. It's
I still think it's energy. I mean, it might turn into energy if you're getting yourself so stressed that then fatigue is produced. But
right.
it, but I don't think it's energy at all. I think that's a myth that somehow then presents as real. Because I would notice things like, if I was really engaged in a conversation for a couple of hours, I'd feel fine. But if I was engaged in
Right.
a stressful conversation and I was reacting to that stress, that's very
Right.
different. I
Right.
could walk the house for 7,000 steps in a day and I was fine because I wasn't monitoring it. But if I walked to the end of my street and I hadn't meant to do that,
Right.
then then I'd get some symptoms. And what you start to realize is it's that anxiety around what you feel you ought to do and the absolute fear of what if I do too much and crash.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps you stuck.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to create the illness.
Yeah. That
Particularly
looping system.
fear of exercise was enormous for me.
And you're a
um
runner, and that was normally your outlet, is to move your body in healthy ways.
Yeah. And again, actually, that was about stress. So I genuinely believe that what happened to me was that I was burnt out way before COVID. I
Mm,
was running at a million miles an hour, and not just busy, but cognitively and emotionally maxed out, in terms of what had happened to me in the pandemic and just generally trying to cram too much into my life. And so
okay.
I believe that COVID was just the final straw, that my nervous system couldn't cope with the fight or flight of destroying the virus and all the other things I put in, and then trying to get up and get back to normal straight away. So my system shut down because it was trying to protect. But for
Right.
some reason, I got it into my head that that was just about exercise. And then everybody else tells you it's just about exercise. So then you
Mhm.
stop. And then I remember I decided to cycle. I decided that, I was going to try this out, and I'd cycle for 20 minutes. My heart rate didn't get above 70. I was on the flat. There was nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
24 hours later, I crashed. Why did I crash? Because I had intended to only do 10 minutes, and I completely put myself
Mm.
out, and I spent an entire day watching for symptoms and
Yeah.
worrying about it
Yeah.
inadvertently. And
Yeah.
then I got the symptoms. That wasn't energy. That was worry.
That was worry.
That was
Yeah.
worry. That was starting to predict. It was anxiety.
Okay.
It was, and I always thought anxiety was something that people, unconfident people did, people that were a bit anxious.
Uh,
Hypervigilance is worry, is anxiety.
right. Right. Yeah.
Um,
I think that I could relate to that when I would exercise, and the next day, sure, there was worry in there, but then maybe my muscles were a little bit sore, but
yeah,
my body said, fire, shut down, get back in bed, instead of saying, I'm a little sore, it's
yeah,
okay, and walk yourself, show yourself through, instead of freak out and react. And it takes some doing, because your body is coming up with all these sensations that before your mind even has a chance to play in. So, oh gosh.
yeah. I do wonder about the unconscious. I think what happens is, you're right. We just feel, because you're so caught in this, experts have told you that you're not supposed to exercise. Everybody on the long COVID groups tells you,
Mhm.
and then it shows up as real. And actually, then you prove it to yourself. So then the belief is even stronger. So the next time you've already got that expectation. But I think some of it's unconscious. The little kind of just worry about what that muscle might be, that that then means that you interpret it even more.
Right.
Because it's not in the head, but everything's in the head. Every pain is interpreted by the brain. That's
Mhm.
how pain works. And
Yeah.
so it's cycles that we set up inadvertently that I don't even think we're aware of doing. By the time we know, it's when fatigue maybe shows up.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
crazy.
It is. It's crazy. You
It's
said
crazy,
it,
isn't
it
it?
takes it, and the only way you can really get through it is just try your best to just keep on trucking, and ride it out, and do as many loving, positive things in your life. And wow.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I learned, and if my boyfriend ever listens to this, then really sorry, was actually to listen to other people,
Mhm.
and to realize that sometimes you're not the person that knows you well. So my partner for quite a while was saying, Rachel, I think this is worry. I can see it in your
Mhm.
physiology. I can see the stress. And I was going, I'm not stressed. No, don't be ridiculous. It's because I haven't paid. It's because I haven't done. And he was like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
But actually, I owe him an apology. He was right. He was right. He could see the worry, the anxiety, the fear that I was stuck in.
Yeah.
So that was also a huge learning, to actually not get so caught in it's not anxiety, it's not my fault, it's because of COVID, and
Mhm.
actually kind of just see whether people watching you and listening to you maybe do have some part of the jigsaw that maybe kind of help.
Yeah. That's really an important piece, because it's a hard one, because what we've gone through is so unique, and people don't know what we're going through. So the tendency, I think, is to be like, you don't know what's going
Yeah,
on here. Don't claim to think, oh,
yeah,
I'm just worried. But it is important from their perspective to recognize that they are seeing something, and especially if they know you well, it's valid. It's very valid. Yeah.
yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not just a normal kind of, I'm worried about a presentation, or I'm worried
Right.
about a work event. This is kind of, fear. It's like most kind of animalistic fear
Right.
that you're stuck in. It's fight or flight, but for many of us, fight or flight for months and months and months.
Yeah.
You know, that's not just a normal little worry, you know. And it's the
No.
pandemic. I don't know about you, but the first time that I completely shut down, I mean, that's scary when you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm convinced that long COVID is not so dissimilar to post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh,
There's some similarities, you
I
know.
think it is. I think it is almost the same thing. I mean, it is the body in this continual state of fight or flight and easily
Yeah,
triggered, which is why it's so important to slow down as much as we
yeah,
can so we can see the stimulation and any of these triggers and be able to respond more gently and lovingly to ourselves. Okay, so what would be your go-to, like, oh, this makes Rachel feel the best? Like, okay, I feel something coming on. This is what I need to do for myself right now.
ooh,
Like
for
real yummy, real like, oh, this is happy, happy stuff.
do you know what? I like, normal me doesn't necessarily do this, but me, when I've been feeling really anxious, is comedy. And for some reason, when I was at my absolute worst with long COVID, and I think I just lived and breathed long COVID all day, I sat down and I decided to watch Simon Pegg. Now, which I can't remember, The End of the World or Shaun of the Dead or one of those movies. I tell you what, it was the best medicine ever. It was the
Oh,
first time
good.
in months that I had laughed.
Oh,
And 6 months after having recovered from long COVID, I got myself into a bit of a worry cycle over a bit of probably just normal woken up sleep, bit of brain fog that was probably just a bit of stress and nothing really, but I got myself in a real cycle, and it got to the stage where I got some anxiety again and actually some symptoms came back, and I decided to watch Shaun of the Dead, and I just started laughing. And all
good.
my symptoms started to, or all my anxiety started to go, and I forgot about the fact that I was supposed to be anxious and just kind of engaged in the movie. I
Isn't
would
that
say
great?
find your favorite film, find your favorite kind of comedy thing, something you don't have to concentrate on too much, that you can just engage in and forget about everything else, and then start to notice, does everything disappear, you know? Because if
Yeah,
it does, then you know that it's not permanent.
right,
These
right.
symptoms don't just stay for, you know, they tend to ebb and flow.
Yeah,
That for me was proof that if they ebb and flow, it's not permanent.
right. Yeah. Oh gosh, such a good. I love that you watch funny movies. I did the same thing. And
Did you?
yeah,
What did
and
you want?
it's a great, oh, well, the first time it was a dismal, it had been a dismal few weeks and I just couldn't get myself out of it. And I remember sitting on the couch and ultimately watched lots of funny movies, but this was one time I sat down and I just looked at funny animal videos, and my husband was sitting at the kitchen table and I was sitting on the couch looking, and all of a sudden I was like and he said it was the first time he had heard me laugh in a few weeks, and I just
Yeah.
kept doing, I'm like, okay, just over and over, and then I'm like, okay, let's get up and go for a walk. That was enough to just change the
Break the
subject a
pattern,
little
isn't
bit
it?
and move it
Breaking the
out,
pattern.
breaking the
Interrupting the
pattern.
pattern. I think that's what it
Right.
is, isn't it? And if you
It's a
forget
big
that you're
part of
supposed
it.
to be ill, sorry, I'm talking over
Yeah.
you there.
No, no, I was. You're right. You forget that you forget your body's like, oh, wait, on to something else. It's like we're, you know, dogs with shortest attention spans, like squirrel, you know, like, it's like, okay, and we can do that. We can show ourselves another way. So,
Exactly. If you sort of get out of hypervigilance and just kind of actually engage, it's like a lot of people seem to get better when they go on holiday to a new place. And I think part of that is kind of getting out of the association.
yeah.
But it happened to me. I went camping in mid-April when I barely left the house, and I went camping. I thought it'd be all right. We've got a camper van, and my partner put everything up. And yeah, I noticeably was better. And we both looked at each other and went, this is really weird, but why am I better? But I think it's because I'd forgotten about the four walls and
Right,
and the
right.
hammock where I spent a lot of time, and the hot tub that I sat in for months trying to recoup. I'd forgotten about all of that. It was just I was just normal for a weekend. And because
Right.
I'd forgotten, I then looked back and went, hang on a minute, something weird's happening. A lot of people have said the same.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And speaking of laughter, I think you know what's
Hey,
coming.
hey, okay,
I'm
okay, okay.
hoping that we can end this amazing conversation. Rachel, gosh, I just can't thank you enough for sharing so much with me today and with the world. And what is your blog? Tell me say your blog site again, what the website is.
I don't know actually, because Google Chrome just saves it. So I don't know.
I'll post it. I'll
WordPress.
post it
It's
in
on
the
the
show notes.
WordPress. I'm not sure. I've never ever blogged before.
Oh,
But
well,
you know what?
it's on my website in the recovery stories, so people can find it
Yeah.
there.
Do
But
you know what? Those recovery stories are so, so important. So I got
aren't they?
lucky. I had two friends that had recovered from long COVID, and
You
I got so
did.
lucky by the fact that that gave me hope. You know, again, that pulls you through. So those recovery stories are so important
Oh,
to
I'm
keep
so
doing
glad
that.
you brought that up because I didn't have anybody to connect with. And
Yeah,
I found one person and that I just glommed on. Like, tell me more. I can recover. And yeah, if we can identify with someone else and
yeah,
know that we
yeah,
can recover and we can believe that our bodies start to know it and it can go a long way. So yeah,
yeah. It's
you
huge, huge.
you sharing your story is you sharing your recovery story is huge. Not just that you recovered, but how you've recovered. It's just, yeah, thank you again so much.
Oh,
So,
you're very welcome.
so
So
to
the laughter, I
totally,
put that
what's
off.
that?
The laughter. I have been pre-warned, haven't I, about
Yep,
the
you've
laughter?
been pre-warned. I'm getting my timer out. We're gonna laugh. We're just gonna forget about everything and laugh for 25, 30 seconds and just
I love it.
and
I love
I
it.
feel like sometimes you have to tell a joke or think of something funny, but my gosh, my cheeks hurt from smiling and talking to you for this time already that I don't think I need any kind of warm up. So
I'm starting
so
early. I'm starting
so
early.
so I will say I'll do a little countdown and then we'll just laugh together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, laugh.
Oh. That's so funny.
And done. Oh, thank you so much. You have such a beautiful smile and laugh. It was easy
So
to
funny.
laugh
That's
with
so
you.
funny. That's so funny.
Well, I really do hope that we can visit again. I mean, I know we will stay in touch, but I hope that you will come back
Oh,
and share
I'm
more.
on for a mountain visit to where you live.
Oh,
That's I'm yeah, exactly.
okay. Yeah. Come on over.
Exactly. Oh, brilliant. Well, Amy, thank you. That's been so good, and so good that you're also recovered as well. And what I mean, you're doing so fantastically in terms of the website as well. So that's got to be a really important part of everyone's journey.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's an important part of after you recover, right? It's that phase 3 that I talk about on the site is, let's be better than before we got COVID. Let's learn from this and share with others and yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Not everything is actually about long COVID. Some
No,
of it is about
right?
changing lifestyles that needed to be changed and
Yeah.
thought patterns that needed to be changed way before COVID came about. So that was just the thing that forced the issue a little bit, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I hope you and I can both help people
Yeah,
come
I
to
love
that
that.
realization and help people through that. So thank you so much, Rachel.
Very welcome.
We'll talk again soon, I hope. Have a wonderful day.